a second belt? I've already got this one.
I'm the king of Dublin. I'm the real king.
You're looking at the king of Dublin, yeah? You're looking at him.
Conor McGregor, a name that once ignited arenas and dominated headlines, now echoes through stories of scandal, controversy, and downfall. The Irish fighter who rose from the streets of Dublin to conquer the UFC with audacious confidence and brutal skill now finds himself the center of public scrutiny, his empire of fame and fortune shaken by his own actions. How does a man so seemingly invincible fall so quickly? From record-breaking pay-per-view fights to shocking personal incidents, McGregor's journey is a story of meteoric rise, unrivaled arrogance, and spectacular collapse. In his early days, he captured the imagination of millions, proving that even a broke plumber from Dublin could defy the odds. Yet, as the victories mounted, so too did the temptations, the distractions, and the ego that would eventually consume him. This is not just a story about fighting. It's a story about human ambition, the fragility of reputation, because the rise of the Notorious was as breathtaking as his fall is cautionary, and what comes next will shock even those who thought they knew the man behind the headlines. Conor McGregor's story begins in the modest neighborhoods of Dublin, Ireland, where he lived as a young man scraping by, dreaming of a life far beyond his circumstances. Working as a plumber, he was far from destined for global fame, yet he carried within him a rare combination of grit, skill, and an audacious personality that set him apart. Early on, McGregor immersed himself in a mix of fighting disciplines: karate, taekwondo, boxing, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, crafting a unique, chaotic style that few could anticipate and even fewer could defend. But it wasn't just his technique that drew attention. It was his presence, his confidence, and the way he carried himself. He didn't merely step into the octagon to fight. He entered to dominate, to entertain, and to command the crowd. The audience responded, and McGregor quickly became more than a fighter. He became a phenomenon. From modest beginnings, he exploded onto the global stage, drawing millions of fans across continents. UFC 189 and UFC 194 cemented his status as a box office sensation, breaking pay-per-view records and redefining what it meant to be a UFC superstar. Fans weren't just watching fights, they were witnessing a narrative of defiance and ambition. A man who seemed capable of turning sheer will into tangible victory. Yet beneath the dazzling victories and the roaring crowds, the first subtle cracks in his foundation began to appear. His meteoric rise wasn't built solely on skill. It was fueled by charisma, bravado, and the relentless pursuit of attention, which, while captivating, hinted at the vulnerabilities that would later threaten everything he had built. And just as he reached the peak of fame, those cracks would soon grow into chasms. No moment in McGregor's early career captured the world's imagination quite like his fight against Jose Aldo at UFC 194. Aldo, the undefeated featherweight champion for nearly a decade, represented the ultimate obstacle, a seemingly insurmountable mountain standing between McGregor and undeniable greatness. For months, McGregor baited and provoked him relentlessly, mastering the art of psychological warfare, vowing to knock him out in the first round. Fans, media, and fellow fighters watched as he orchestrated a spectacle of confidence, audacity, and charisma, calling Aldo everything from coward to challenger, all while projecting an image of near invincibility. When the bell rang, McGregor delivered on his promise. In just 13 seconds, his left fist sent Aldo to the mat, leaving the world in shock and awe. The stadium erupted, the headlines screamed of a new king, and McGregor's persona as the Notorious became legendary overnight. But even in triumph, subtle warnings of vulnerability emerged. The sudden and dramatic knockout, while glorious, masked a deeper truth. McGregor's career was increasingly dependent on his persona as much as his skill. The very audacity and bravado that won fans and titles could also become a double-edged sword, laying the groundwork for a future where ego might overshadow discipline. The dazzling victory set a precedent. McGregor was now expected to deliver miracles, to perform under the glare of global expectation. And while the world celebrated, the seeds of overconfidence and distraction were quietly planted, destined to sprout when the stakes would become even higher. McGregor's next major turning point came in the world of professional boxing, facing Floyd Mayweather at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. This wasn't merely a fight, it was a cultural phenomenon, drawing over 4.3 million pay-per-view buys and earning McGregor nearly $100 million in a single night. Overnight, he transformed from the UFC champion to a global superstar, mentioned alongside the likes of Ronaldo and Beyoncé. The event became less about combat skill and more about spectacle, flamboyant entrances, flashy suits, and the larger-than-life persona McGregor cultivated as Mystic Mac. He projected invincibility, promising to dominate one of boxing's greatest ever. But the fight itself revealed the limits of bravado. While McGregor's opening rounds ignited excitement with precise strikes and sheer showmanship, Mayweather's patience and mastery ultimately overcame him. By the 10th round, exhaustion and overextension led to a corner stoppage, leaving McGregor humbled in defeat. The lesson was harsh. Fame, money, and global attention could not substitute for preparation, discipline, and experience. While the payday and spotlight consumed him, McGregor's once untouchable focus began to waver. The world saw him as a fearless fighter, but the cracks in his approach were now visible to everyone. This was the turning point where the intoxicating lure of fame started to erode the very qualities that had fueled his rise. The relentless work ethic, strategic discipline, and mental focus that had made him a champion. McGregor's confrontation with Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 229 would prove to be one of the most dramatic chapters in his career. In the months leading up to the fight, McGregor intensified his provocations, attacking Khabib personally, mocking his religion and homeland, and promising a swift, humiliating victory. Fans expected the usual flair of trash talk and psychological dominance. However, Khabib proved to be an unyielding force, a disciplined, mentally steel-clad athlete who refused to be rattled. From the opening bell, McGregor was overwhelmed by relentless grappling and control, a stark contrast to the lightning-fast knockouts that had defined his career. By the 4th round, trapped in a chokehold, he tapped out. The arena, once roaring for the Notorious, fell silent, punctuated only by Khabib's triumph. Social media erupted with shock, mockery, and debates about the end of an era. Boo! The true tragedy wasn't just the loss. It was the revelation that McGregor's own complacency and indulgence had left him vulnerable. No longer just a warrior in the octagon, he was a man whose ego and distractions had eroded his edge. This fight wasn't merely a defeat. It was a public unveiling of the consequences of overconfidence and the dangers of allowing fame and fortune to replace focus and preparation. For fans who had idolized him, it was a sobering reminder that no legend is immune to the cost of ego. Outside the octagon, McGregor's story only grew darker, with incidents that shocked the public and tarnished his legacy. The infamous Dolly attack at UFC 223 in New York left fighters injured, while his handcuffed arrest, broadcast worldwide, painted a picture of recklessness and disregard for law and safety. Months later, at a Dublin pub, McGregor assaulted a man simply for refusing to sample his whiskey brand, Proper 12. Further fueling media criticism and social media outrage. Rumors and reports of additional legal troubles circulated, from hotel altercations in Dublin to clashes with fans and DJs internationally. While many did not lead to convictions, the pattern was clear. His once celebrated boldness had crossed into destructive behavior. Social media hashtags like McGregor is done spread rapidly, signaling that the public's patience had worn thin. Where once his audacity was seen as genius, it was now viewed as dangerous and unhinged. Even loyal fans struggled to defend him. McGregor's actions outside the octagon were now as consequential as any fight, eroding not just his reputation, but the commercial empire he had painstakingly built. McGregor's commercial ventures, once a source of immense wealth, could not survive the public backlash. Proper 12, his whiskey brand, was sold in 2021 for $600 million, but McGregor was sidelined from promotion. Sponsorships from Reebok, Bud Light, and others disappeared, signaling the decline of his influence in both sport and business. From a global icon to a figure synonymous with scandal, McGregor's trajectory illustrated a harsh reality. Success is fragile, and fame amplifies every misstep. His story serves as a cautionary tale that talent alone cannot sustain greatness. Discipline, humility, and character are equally essential. The very ego that fueled his rise became the instrument of his downfall. Audiences once inspired by his confidence now saw a man undone by hubris. A stark reminder that victories in life extend far beyond the accolades or wealth amassed. They are measured in the ability to maintain integrity and self-mastery in the face of triumph. McGregor's empire, both in sports and commerce, may have crumbled, but the lessons of his fall echo louder than any knockout ever could. Conor McGregor's story isn't just about MMA, it's a mirror for anyone chasing success. Talent, ambition, and fearlessness can bring a person to incredible heights, but without self-discipline, humility, and focus, even the mightiest can fall. McGregor's ego, unchecked and amplified by fame and wealth, became his greatest adversary. The fall stripped away glory, trust, and respect, leaving a cautionary tale etched in global memory. The lesson is universal. The most formidable opponent isn't the challenger outside, it's the ego within. Victory is not defined by paydays or praise, but by the ability to remain grounded, disciplined, and true to principles in the face of temptation. McGregor may have lost his shine, but his story persists as a warning. The higher you climb, the more vigilant you must be. For champions and ordinary people alike, the greatest battles are internal, and the cost of underestimating oneself can be catastrophic. Always beware the ego, because it can turn the most glorious heights into an unforgiving fall.